What we do is we basically bring the library out to children.
It actually started when the founder of the Salvation Army saw people living on the street, children forced to work in factories.
This year, we're going to honor the legacy of Dr. James Farmer with a scholarship.
Setting up these thought leadership councils, it's the best way to effectively engage our members.
Our teachers, I would put their educational qualifications and their training up against anybody.
Hello and welcome to Cox Connections. I'm your host, Catherine Falk, market leader for Cox in Northern Virginia. Thank you for joining us today. Mount Vernon offers a glimpse into 18th century life through its gardens, grounds, intriguing museum exhibits, and immersive programs honoring George Washington's life and legacy. We're excited today to be joined by Dr. Doug Bradburn, founding director of the Washington Library at Mount Vernon, and he's here to tell us all about it. Welcome, Doug. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you very much, Catherine. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us, give our viewers an idea of what's at Mount Vernon, an overview of the facilities and resources at Mount Vernon proper.
So Mount Vernon, George Washington's Mount Vernon, is a historic home, an 18th century home and estate. And the landscape that was designed by Washington at the end of the 18th century and maintained. It has his tomb there as well. His own tomb and Martha Washington's remains are there. There's a wharf. There's a model farm with reconstructed barns. There's an education center and museum as well. There's a grist mill and distillery. It really is a premier living history museum and historic home, the most visited historic home in America, and a place where people can spend easily a whole day or multiple days.
And you said most visited. How many visitors do you have a year?
Roughly 1.1 million visitors a year come to Mount Vernon. A large number of those are school children as well, which is great that they continue to come learn about the father of the country at Mount Vernon itself. So that makes it the most visited historic place in America.
And you're open every day?
Every day, 365 days a year.
And so tell us about how Mount Vernon came to be, how the estate came to be preserved, and who did that? Yeah,
it's a great story. Well, George Washington inherited Mount Vernon from his brother's widow around 1759. And he really transformed the estate through his lifetime. He died in 1799. It was really the most famous historic home, most famous home in America during the Revolution and after the Revolution. Immediately after the American Revolution, he moves back to Mount Vernon. He resigns his commission in the Continental Army and stunned everybody by doing that. Comes back to Mount Vernon and really starts to redesign it in the way that it looks today. The landscape, the house, that's all finished in the 1780s. And it's the most visited home then. People are visiting him from all over the country, from all over the world. They're coming to see the great Washington. It's a well-known place. Now, after he becomes the first president and then again comes back to Mount Vernon, it also is a very popular place. But when he dies in 1799, and Martha Washington dies in 1801, it's inherited by Bushrod Washington, his nephew, who was a Supreme Court justice for 30 years, and then it goes into the Washington family, and it really goes into decline. They're unable to maintain it. It is an estate that's sort of becoming run down, but it has his remains, George Washington's remains and Martha Washington's remains, and so there's a great public demand to visit the place of the father of our country. And so ultimately, it's the initiative and vision of some women who see Mount Vernon in a state of disrepair and are really upset by this notion that if the men of America can't maintain Mount Vernon, then the ladies of America will. And there's an extraordinary woman named Anne Pamela Cunningham from South Carolina who begins an organization called the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, which is attempting to raise the money nationally to buy the home from the family of Washington so that they can maintain it for people to see. The state of Virginia doesn't want the estate to manage it. The United States Congress doesn't want to run the estate, and that's when the ladies really step in. And so Anne Pamela Cunningham puts together this group of remarkable women who succeed in raising $200,000 in the 19th century, which is a lot of money. Now it's a tremendous amount of money then, to purchase the estate, which they do in 1858. And they've maintained control of Mount Vernon since 1858, making it a place for people to learn about George Washington and to see how he lived. Now, the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, by doing that, really became the first national historic preservation organization. And so they invented a lot of the rules that have become standard for places that want to maintain the historic integrity of buildings and landscapes. And the ladies have really been leaders in that since the mid-19th century.
Wow, and so today you can see the mansion, you can see the gristmill, the farm, all of these wonderful assets, the museum right there in one location.
That's right. So the ladies' vision was to maintain everything the way it was in George Washington's time. And so first maintaining and stabilizing the estate, the house, the mansion house itself was crucial. And then gradually, they were able to maintain the gardens and rebuild the greenhouse and all the other ancillary parts of the estate. It's really the most historically preserved 18th century plantation complex in North America. I mean, it really is an extraordinary thing. All the buildings that they were able to preserve from the time of George Washington and then maintain and then interpret more correctly over time. Another great story that they've preserved is what we call the view shed, the view of George and Martha Washington, really beginning in the 1950s, led by one of the vice regents, who was the vice regent from Ohio, Mrs. Payne Bolton, who was a congresswoman. And she was instrumental in creating a national park there across the river from Mount Vernon, but also in innovating, working with the state of Maryland to develop a lot of what we know today as sort of the easements, the conservation easements that many of us have on our property. These are really developed by the Mount Vernon Ladies Association with state law and working with local landowners to develop a way to preserve the environment, in this kind of historic way. And it's really an extraordinary success story of public-private partnership working together to make sure that this place, this special place, remains as it was for people to enjoy moving forward. So now you can go to Mount Vernon and stand on the piazza and see the same views of the Potomac River and the beautiful landscape around there without having to look at a sewage treatment plant across the river itself. So it's a great story. And really, the Mount Vernon Ladies Association is filled with these stories, large and small, of trying to figure out ways to help people learn about the past in a way that is innovative and correct and authentic. And that's really their main mission moving forward.
And we definitely owe an amazing debt of gratitude to the Ladies Association and the fact that we can see all of those wonderful things there today, the gristmill and the gardens and the piazza and the mansion and the shops and the restaurant. But how can our viewers learn more about those and what they can see on the property?
Well, the one way to learn more about what we do is at mountvernon.org, which is the main website of the estate. And what we've done over the last few years, the Mount Vernon Ladies Association has really expanded their educational power. And so they really started in the 1990s, developing more of these areas, the farms, the grist mill. They did archaeology at the distillery and rebuilt the distillery. And now we actually distill whiskey the same way George Washington did near the end of his life and sell that. So there's lots going on our webpage. Our digital presence is robust, but there's always different things going on the estate as well.
Great. Dr. Bradburn, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Dr. Bradburn. Stay tuned for more Cox Connections.